Well, welcome to my second part of why projects are green but customers are red. In the first part, we really understood that traditional delivery model is no longer be beneficial for customer or the project success. So what we need to do, we need to focus on the customer sentiment, the project value that it gives for the customers, the benefit that we're going to what we call as outcome. So let's go in a little more deeper here on what are the invisible gaps in our project delivery. Most of us know we are having a clean status dashboard report, right? So let's really get into a little more detail. I'm sure that you are with me. So look at this. The invisible gaps, I would call it as three invisible critical gaps in our project delivery. Expectations gap, that's the biggest gap there. What was imagined differ from what was delivered. Relate to that Homer car delivery, right? You talked about. So we've seen this just now in the previous part, right? What was imagined differs from what was delivered. The second important here is the communication gap. Update sent, but alignment not confirmed. And I've seen this particular typical scenario. We just kind of send details out there. Hey, this is where exactly required high level, somewhere exactly we are looking for some additional help from XYZ. It's just that. And what we are not doing is simple thing I'm just talking about. You are not really articulating it well to the little more detail level where who will go to help when it is required, and if you do not get this by this, what will be the impact on the project? Don't you think that that will probably be a better way of communicating about the, you call it as risk or the project status? Normally we don't know. We just put it one liner. Hey, we highlight it. This particular dependency is there. That's it, right? The third important across is business context gap. So we are talking about delivery focus may ignore shifting priorities. Guess what? When you, of course, in agile model, that's a different thing where at least you know what is required and then there will be changes. But again, even that also there are priorities going to change. Today they are looking for some a few features. Maybe it was defined in the earlier sprint there, and then they pushed into the new sprint. But what happens after that? The priority got changed, and probably somewhere it missed out, and it's a waste of time. Even a day with a few people working in the project, it is going to impact the cost. It's going to impact the whole budget of this particular engagement, right? So that is very important. How do you understand the expectations? I have a detailed customer expectations workshop to understand the gap there. Actually, how do I address that customer expectations? The communication gap is very, very, very important. I've seen the status report, one page status report, which is just giving RGB, red, green, whatever, amber or whatever, and then say that, hey, we delivered, this is the milestone, we delivered this, we are good. But if you really drill detail, but it is not actually going in a right direction. It doesn't have the dependency part, it doesn't have the risk part, it doesn't have exactly where are we here, we have the next milestone there. Are we really in line with the next milestone? How much? Remember one thing, even invoice also is important. Your milestone delivery, how many, what is exactly invoice that you have made so far, and when is the next cycle coming, and what is the due date? So, and the financial part actually. So when you actually having the project, it is not project delivery alone. It's a financial aspect. It's dependency, risk, multiple things. If it is clearly articulated in all respect, and then walk through on that every minute when you are talking to the customer on a regular basis, you've got to really make sure that customer is with you, aligned with you, right? So moving on now. So I would say that the first one, let's come into the first. This is an interesting one. What was promised versus what was perceived? Very typical thing, right? Initial pitch vision versus actual execution. And I just relayed the same video this just now we discussed. Assumptions never revalidated. And one of the things I've seen this also in my project. So we put a business SOW or contract PU, whatever you call it in your organization, where we typically put the assumptions and risk. And I have a different detailed discussion on assumptions and risk itself. Most of the assumptions are more resource oriented, and also risk are more resource oriented there. But it will never really articulate. And the same assumptions and risk, maybe it is a financial assumption, contract assumption, resource assumption, the dependency, they're all stereotyped. They're all there, same from one project to another project. Guess what? Assumptions and risk should change from project to project. It should be dependent on that. And whatever the assumption you made earlier part of the program, have you ever validated it? As any assumptions got changed? Is it added more into the risk part? Or do you see that there is an issue in the project further because of that assumption not taken care? Scope clarity is not equal to the expectations clarity. Remember one thing. So if your expectation is not clearly articulated or explicitly mentioned, I don't think that is a right scope of the engagement. So even if you deliver exactly what was signed off, expectations evolve. I told you already that expectations itself is a big topic in so which I normally take a mastery class for that. If you don't revisit them more regularly, and misalignments grows silently. I would underline the word silently because one of the things I also mentioned, most of the time I mentioned project delivery failure doesn't really, happens with a loud noise, big escalations. The project delivery escalations starts silently and then it grows and then becomes eventually it's like a bomb, right? So hope there is no problem here. You understand. Please understand that revalidate your assumption, revalidate the expectations. Make sure your scope is clearly defined as per the expectation. Revalidate, work, 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 and then make sure that you spend a lot of time in order to get this. Gap two, the communication gap, and as we discussed already, status report overloaded with a lot of data, and vice versa. Actually, sometimes our scope is not clearly status report is not even mentioned. One page of status, it doesn't have anything across. Nobody will know who is who of the project and who is delivering when, what is the next delivery coming, what is the problems and all. Nobody mentioned that. And then third point, business impact not articulated. And this is precisely the point I'm talking about. Dependency is there, and once the dependency is there, what is the business impact of the dependency? Whether this is going to impact this particular delivery or this particular milestone, if you're not articulated it well, then I don't think that it's giving the right picture to the customers, right? So no validation of customer interpretation. Have you ever interpreted properly in such a way the customer is right with that? Have you ever recorded? Have you ever communicated back through either minutes or whatever the status saying, hey, we agreed on this on a particular day. Is there any question, problems, clarification? And the other point also, when you're talking to the customer next time, you go through that particular previous status report, what has been communicated, who's who, what is exactly been agreed. If you do that, that is the revalidations we are talking about. Sending updates is not, look at that particular statement, sending update is not the same as ensuring alignment. Okay, it is just a paper, I would say, or even just a dashboard, right? Trust build when customer feel understood. You got to really ensure that you put a lot of stuff when customer is, and I have got probably complaints from the customer, hey, our status report is showing everything. Remember one thing, I myself got actually kind of informed by a customer saying that, Ganesh, what is this actually, where should I really find what, something, very early part of my career actually. So he was so frustrated, believe it or not, because he was not able to understand what I have put in the status report. I of course, as a writer or a designer of that status report, I know that this is where exactly. But if somebody else, external person or a customer has to really understand, It's not going to be easy unless you explain it, and again, it is cumbersome again, right? So talk about this particular communication gap, and we talked about business context gap. This is my primary point here. So we do everything across, but what is the current business reality? Deep focus on sprint velocity, but look at the pressure that customer is going through. When we started the engagement, obviously that project, probably there will be a different expectations, but over the period of time, business expectation change, competition change, and every competitor is coming with new features and all. Then you got to validate across. So what is the business impact now on this particular changes? Is it going to really be in line with the current context? So no conversation about shifting priority. Never ever we look into that. Is there any priority changes that we expected this? These are the priorities that we agreed across. Do there any changes to the priorities out there? So I think you got to revalidate these things more and more and more on a regular basis. So when we talk about, and I just want to link before we go into that last, when business urgency changes, the delivery does not adapt, then confidence start eroding. Remember that when business scenario changes, you got to really figure it out. So if I just put the summary around here, you just follow the traditional approach. But what happens actually, because of there are gaps, the invisible gaps that I said, in terms of the communication, in terms of business context, in and multiple other ways actually. So your scope dashboard is not really aligned with the requirements now, changes in that. So all these aspects related to silently customer is losing confidence, and once you start losing confidence, that kinds of creates a dissatisfaction, right? So let's get into a quick quiz here. Now, when does confidence usually start eroding? When SLA is reached, when milestone is delayed, when sponsors drops informal engagements, when formal escalation email is sent. When do you think that confidence usually start eroding, and why? I'll give you a second. You thought through A, B, C, D. How many of you are really taken as C? And that's the right answer. When sponsor stops informal engagement, remember that whenever you see your sponsor or the customers who you are interacting stop in some sense talking to you, talking or responding to the email, not participating in the meetings, that's the first silent killer. It is going to really kill the project. Somewhere something is wrong, something is fishy there, right? So this is what I wanted you to remember, that the moment you see something is happening here, so just figure it out, where are the situation going wrong. Okay, let's talk about something about early warning signal, and I'm sure that you relate, right? Reduce sponsor engagement, that's the first one we talked about. So somewhere exactly the sponsor engagements reduced means something is wrong. Okay, and it's more transactional meeting, customery kind of meeting, right? Customer will come. Remember one thing, I've seen this also. Four or five customers, stakeholders are important for that project. And you see that only one or two will come, and there is no consistency there as well. Today there are one or two here and two day, next day, next. So there is no consistency what was been discussed earlier and all. And the customers attend just for the sake of attending. Means they lost already confident that you guys are not delivering in a right way, or it is not in line with their custom, the business impact or the priority that we talked about. Increased escalations now started escalating, and then there are so many senior leaders also copied, means something is definitely is boiled to the highest level, so you got to take care, right? The silence, sometimes the customer even not bothered to talk to you, and all silence is a biggest killer here, an early indicator of disengagement we already talked about. So escalations are late stage symptom. I told you this as well. Silence is the first indicator. The moment you see there is a silence there, customer is not attending, stakeholders not attending regularly, meetings are become more conventional meetings, no value, no contribution. I think that's the situation where you need to assess immediately, stop your work, bring all those people, and then realize what is the problem. Okay. I hope you understood in detail about these early warning signals. We talked about case study here, and I just don't want to go a little detail here. Maybe we can talk when we have the mastery class there. So it's just an indication of, like, in a typical case study that I worked, in a case which is a healthcare system, everything was good. Guess what? Project was good, green, and they're happy and things like that. The dashboard is green, and typically that's where exactly the situation we discussed. But what happens towards that expectation, the drift, maybe their expectation was different, and what we were delivering was different, and we did not revalidate across, and I remember that we are almost through now. They said we want to, no, we don't want to renew it. We didn't understand why exactly, because we are delivering as per the expectation requirements, whatever we captured. And why is this happening? And again, there's a lot of things that you need to do that, because you are not the alone alone there and working in the project. There are so many other stakeholders into that. Everybody has to be there. I said, the business team is not really managing the business requirement, because they are the people who will be talking. And then it comes to the technical team, and technical team interpreting that, and then you go into the delivery team. Then after those interpretation, there is a two-layer system there. You eventually, the project is delivered by you, and people will blame you for not delivering it. But if you really align the dots there across, the problem is that the beginning, where business articulation was not there properly, and who was doing that, and who's the owner, who has actually communicated that appropriately. So that's where exactly the typically this engagement actually happened. Then what did we do? We just conducted sponsor realignment discussion, and we understood, and we shown that where are the problems, actually clearly articulating the problems is in here, here, here. This is the requirement. This is where technical team worked on. And value realization workshop we conducted shifted focus from output. So and we involved all the stakeholders, even though delivery is alone our department, but end of the day, when the project is successful, you got to really go a little more, one or two steps ahead. Actually, you got to own everything, because end-to-end engagement is what matters. Sometimes you may doing right thing, but end of the day you are failed, because your customer is not happy, and they just think that you are not delivered in right way. Added governance metrics, and we just measured outcome effectiveness, not just delivery progress. Reframed reporting towards business improvement, connected milestone to operational gains, and contract renewed, and we became strategic vendor for them. And it is not the story, actually, it is the reality which I was involved. And it was a great turnaround, I would say. So what worked well, it is a constant communication, clearly articulating the scope of the engagement, clearly articulating the dependency part of, clearly mentioning about what is happening in the project, why there is a dependency, who has to do what. All these aspects, even though the scope of the engagement is only for hours, only for delivery, but we had to really align with all two, three together there to make sure that everybody is aligned there. And they are also part of the business review committee, also the business review team also should be part of the discussion, so that they can articulate. The most of the time, what happened, it is in our silos also, right? So you are delivering the project, of course, in a right way, but you say, hey, this is a part of the business team, they have not articulated well. But what happens actually if they are not in the part of the project? It's lost, right? And of course, you have to figure it out, who is that business team, and 1 week delay there, it's gone, right? So then it will impact your project in terms of the budget and cost or whatever, and the effort, and top of it, already your customer is lost confidence. And every time that is a simple thing across, delivery team is not matching, managing the project properly, right? So that's where you have to really, when you see the requirements also in the beginning, I would suggest you guys, please make sure that what is the scope of the engagement, what is your scope, and what are the dependency, who are the other stakeholder involved, are they doing the right thing, and who how do we really interconnect those people in the value of the project, in to make sure that project is successful. You are alone cannot deliver the project, without really involving of stakeholders. I'm repeating, the stakeholders involvement at multiple levels are very important, and it's delivery responsibility to make sure that is done. You cannot say to the customer, hey, that's not my scope, I'm done with my scope. You can't, because you also feel you're a part of the project, right? So it is important you don't deliver, you don't do that, of course. You don't go and straight work with it. But at least why not you articulate it effectively and making sure that business team also understand or another team is also understand, yes, they have to do it and then make sure that you put that as your buffer there or make sure that dependency is taken care and then cost part is actually worked out in that. There are multiple things, as I said, that my mastery class talk about all these aspect business scenarios. So yeah, that's precisely what I wanted to cover in the second part of the program, where we talked about these invisible gaps and how to really, what are the early warnings and how to really, talk about, how do we overcome a little bit of, alignment point of view. Okay, so let's go into third part.